Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Just this last weekend, my husband and I last minute got to attend a practical performance class with Tim Herron in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. And I wanted to kind of go through and highlight some of the major pieces that I took away from that class. There was an absolute metric ton shared in the class. It was a full 2 days. We got there early in the morning and we were there until the sun was setting. I couldn't possibly cover everything and every topic that we touched on in the class, but I wanted to share with you guys some of the major takeaways. So we started the class by running through a USPSA stage so that we could kind of get a feel for where we were at as shooters, and Tim could kind of get an idea for where we were at as shooters. And then after we did that, we talked through it and some of the things that we needed to work on as individual students. And then we went over to a separate bay where we worked on really individual things so that we could take those to the stage later and get to put them into practice in that same stage. So we were learning fundamentals and then learning how to piece them together and then taking them back over to that stage and seeing how those apply in practice. Hence, practical performance. Something that I really liked about the way that Tim teaches is that he kind of taught things in steps, and each step built upon the other. They weren't kind of disjointed things that we kind of had to piece together ourselves. It was really easy to follow, and that helped me personally to retain a lot better. At least I feel like I retained a lot better and a lot more because there was such a linear learning pattern instead of kind of spotty and disjointed. One of the first things that Tim introduced to us on day one was grip pressures. And he did this by just kind of going around shaking our hands and showing us the different pressures that we want to have. But he also had us shake his hand so that he could kind of confirm that we had a good idea of what pressure we wanted to put. And a lot of us, not just myself, learned that we were putting too much pressure into our strong hand on the gun. And I noticed this made a huge difference for me when I started trying to shoot faster and do target transitions. So I'm trying to pull the trigger faster and I'm doing target transitions. So I'm like losing my sights and then getting back to my sights. And it made a massive difference for me being able to pull the trigger faster, just loosening up my strong hand grip. And I noticed that when I would just naturally tighten it back up again, I would get trigger freeze. And it was really frustrating, but Tim did a really good job of kind of walking me through that and reminding me to loosen up that hand. Naturally, in recoil, we tend to want to grip down, and that's what actually leads to a lot of low and left shots on the target, is us kind of like, I'm gonna grip the gun really hard, and we like pull the trigger and do all this like tensioning, and it affects the way that we shoot. And so that was one of my major takeaways, was just loosening up my strong hand grip and focusing on using my support hand a lot more. And I'm excited to kind of work that into my dry fire and work that into my live fire. I think it's going to make a huge difference for me learning how to apply that and eventually getting to a place where it's kind of natural for me and I don't have to think about it as much. Another thing that we spent quite a bit of time on was shot calling. And if you don't know what shot calling is, it's just essentially knowing where on the target your bullet went after you press the trigger. It's having an idea of that without actually seeing the hole in the target. So the way that we kind of worked on this was we went back 25 yards so that we couldn't see the hole in the target, at least not easily. And, you know, we were shooting and then we would have to close our eyes or look down and then holster. And then we had a USPSA target that our partner was holding, and we would point on the target where we were shot calling where our shot went. And this was kind of a frustrating process for me. I've never done it at that distance. And it's something I've generally felt confident doing when I'm at the range. But this was just it was kind of introduced to me in a different way during this class. And Tim noticed that was frustrating for me. And so on day 2, he actually had me arrive to class a little bit earlier so that we could kind of work on that, because like I said, kind of in his curriculum, each thing builds off of the other. So it's helpful to understand this initial concept so you can apply it to the next tier. And so we started day 2 off with just kind of helping me really understand shot calling so that it can kind of set the tone for day 2, and I could kind of continue on that path of learning. Another concept that we went over that I think is going to make a massive difference in my shooting ability over time is an acceptable sight picture. And I learned that for me, I am always trying to put my red dot in the center of my window, regardless of whether or not my dot is already in, say, an A zone center target. I will have the dot all set up and it'll be on the lower right quadrant of my window, but the dot itself is in the A zone. And I still won't pull the trigger, even though the dot is exactly where I want my bullet to go. I will still reorient my gun and my dot so that my dot is in the center of my window in the A zone. And it takes up time. It's unnecessary use of time. And that's something I never would have realized that I was doing myself, or at least not anytime soon. And it was a major help for me to have Tim notice that I was coddling that dot and making sure it was going right into the center of the window. And I was able to speed up or shoot sooner because I was able to accept that my dot was on the right lower part of my window, or the top left, or the top right. It didn't have to be centered. The dot just has to be where I want the bullet to go. My next major takeaway was to relax. And I learned this out at 25 yards when we were working on shot calling. And I noticed myself just really tensing up. Like my shoulders were tense, my arms were tense, my legs, my back muscles, like I was engaging everything. And that's something I kind of do-ish, like closer range, but I don't think that I do it quite as much. And it was really obvious and exaggerated for me when we went out to 25 yards, because I think subconsciously we got out that far and I thought, this is gonna be hard. Like this is going to be harder, and therefore I have to hulk. Like I have to like grip down on the gun as hard as I can, and I'm gonna use my toes and my legs and my back and my arms to do that. And in turn, what that did was made me trigger freeze, and it made actually pulling the trigger more difficult and made me kind of pull my shots down to the left again. And so Tim came over and was like, do you see what you're doing? Like all of you is tense. And I couldn't figure out how to not be tense though. That was the thing that was weird, was like I knew I was tense, but I couldn't get loose. I couldn't relax. And what he had me do was, my stance is really wide. Like I have my legs like stanced far apart, and he was like, narrow your stance and just take a breath and chill out and shoot the gun. And that made a huge difference for me. Like it sounds really simple, and I'm sure I've had people say that to me before, but for some reason it made a huge difference for me to just stand a little bit more like I'm normal, like I'm just standing in the grocery store, and shoot. My last major takeaway, and I think this goes hand in hand, no pun intended, with pretty much everything else that I learned, was establishing a good grip out of the holster. And that's something that, a concept that I'm aware of. Like you want to get an established grip while it's in the holster, if possible, to kind of set up your shooting platform, right? And I didn't ever realize that I wasn't putting this part of my hand on the back strap of the gun. I was setting my hand on just the right side of the grip. The right side of my hand was touching the grip, and my left hand was touching the left side of the grip. And it was just like this. And what Tim had me do was just index my elbow back further on my body and bring my hand down so that this meaty part of my hand was making contact not with the side of the grip, but the back strap of the gun. And the thing that did for me was I didn't feel like I had to grip down on the gun as hard with my shooting hand, because I had all that extra support on the back strap of the gun. So that was another key component to helping me relax my shooting hand and focus more on supporting with my support hand. Also, my husband got to come to this class with me last minute, and it was so much fun watching him thoroughly enjoy the class and learn from the things that Tim was teaching us. And it was fun afterwards, kind of getting to talk through the different things that we learned and hearing his takeaways versus my takeaways. My husband and I are definitely at majorly different parts in our shooting journey. He's much further along than me, and he has a lot more practice with it. And so he was able to take really different things away from the class than even I was. And so it was fun afterwards to kind of get to chat through that and learn from each other and the highlights that we each got from the class. The last thing that I wanted to mention about this class was Tim as an instructor. If you guys haven't had the opportunity to take a class with Tim, please go do so. There's no way that you couldn't enjoy it. At least I can't imagine a way that you wouldn't enjoy it. Tim is just an awesome instructor. He's really encouraging, high energy, very thorough, and really, really positive in his feedback. Even when he's correcting you on something, he does a really good job of making that a positive correction and encouraging you through the class. I personally struggle with negative self-talk, especially when I'm learning something new. I tend to revert to, oh, you're so dumb, you don't understand this concept. And just his positivity and encouragement really helped to combat that throughout the class, and I think it made a difference in how much I was able to retain and just learn even in the moment. I'll put a couple of highlights here of all of the moments of encouragement and celebration.
197.
Do it again, do it again, do it again. Come on, do it again.
You let me worry about the time.
Okay. Do you want me to do it again?
Yes.
Oh, that should have been good.
Yeah, it was. Atta girl.
One of my favorite parts of this class, and I think it was a lot of the students' highlight, was when Tim had us all go head to head in a competition. He started out with kind of a drill for each of us and walked us each through that drill and gave us each pointers for ourselves. And then he introduced it as a competition and had us all racing each other. And that was probably some of the most fun shooting I've ever done in my life. I want to have some friends show up to the range and set this whole thing up again because it was so much fun. And the great thing that it did is that it encouraged an environment where we all were pushing ourselves, but we were pushing ourselves after he had walked us through it and kind of given us pointers. And so we had these pointers and then we went into this competition and got to kind of pressure test them. Tim even got in on some of the competition and we all had some good laughs and it was a good time.
I was half expecting that.
That was a 108 and a 105. 185. So
All right,
fastest putt.
for real this time.
The only thing that would have made that better.
Damn it, that was
Mitchell
in the A too.
I'll take that as a first round.
So if you're looking to grow as a shooter and take a class where you're going to learn so many different things and will most certainly have takeaways from a really high energy and encouraging instructor, I would highly recommend you take the next Tim Herron class that's coming your way. And if there isn't one coming your way, I can definitely attest to the fact that this is a class absolutely worth investing in and traveling for. Thanks for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys in my next one.